Greetings brothers, welcome to the weekly tactics video, and today we're going to look over a very different Blood Angels list. However, it placed very highly at a recent GT, so I thought it would be really interesting to see how players are making unorthodox tactics work with Blood Angels, so stick around and I hope you enjoy. So like I said, it's a little bit of a different list this week, but it's worth looking at because I just got my ass kicked by Custodes and also Tau, so let's see what else can maybe be good for Blood Angels right now. And this was run by Ben Carlsson, who did 6th place at the Factorum January GT. As always with these lists, we're going to break down detachment, strategy, strengths and weaknesses, and then some thoughts and scoring. So here is the final score from BCP, and Ben, obviously, like I said, finished 6th, 402 battle points, so about 50 off the winner. He had a 91, 92, 91 and 85 victory, and then just the 43 for his loss. So let's have a look at his list then. And the list starts with a chapter master, and it is a patrol detachment, 2 patrols, and he also has 7 CP. The chapter master, this is a chapter master with a jump pack and a hammer of Baal and the gift of foresight and a storm shield and also Imperium sword. So I guess that means that when he is making his charges, he is on strength 9 because of Imperium sword. He gets 1 bonus attack for Imperium sword. He can reroll his charges as well. Reroll 1 hit and 1 wound, obviously hitting on 2s with the Hammer of Baal, and then a Storm Shield to try and provide some survivability. So not quite as survivable maybe as the one we normally see, but a more offensive build, and we haven't seen the more offensive build very often, so this is interesting to see. We also run the Sanguinary Priest. He's upgraded to the Chief Apothecary, he has the jump back, and he's obviously got the Selfless Healer, so that'll be healing 2 models potentially, and bringing some back to life. Sanguinary Priest is always going to be greatest with expensive infantry models. Something like Blade Guard Veterans at 35 points per model, or something even more expensive, are going to be brilliant for the Sanguinary Priest to resurrect. Terminators would be another good example. So, troops. We got 5 Assault Intercessors in this first patrol detachment. I like Assault Intercessors. I think they're always cheap to reserve, and they can come in and they can cause some obsec. They're fine with their chainswords, they get a decent number of attacks. I think Assault Intercessors are second best troop choice after Incursors. Then we move into Elites. We get 2 squads of Blade Guard Veterans, both just how you see them. 35 points per model, so that'll be the Heavy Bolt Pistol, the Mastercrafted Sword, and the Storm Shield. And the issue with Blade Guard Veteran, I think, at the moment is getting them across the battlefield. So we're just going to talk about what he has transport-wise. We have 2 impulsors, and these are impulsors with no upgrades, so no shield domes or any extra weapons, just as cheap as you can make them, 110 points. Essentially, that makes your Blade Guard Veteran squad kind of like 285 points, and I guess 285 points would be the equivalent of 9 Sanguinary Guard. I guess the trade-off there is 9 Sanguinary Guard would give you 18 wounds and jump packs, and obviously a lot more attacks if you got into combat. The Blade Guard Veterans obviously would have less attacks, but 3 wounds per model, and they're kind of protected in those impulsors, and those impulsors can move forward 14 inches in turn 1, and if there is good positioning or good terrain, essentially the Blade Guard Veterans can then disembark and move, they would disembark within 3 and move 6, so you do have the potential to get those Blade Guard Veterans forward 23 inches in turn 1. I believe the Blade Guard Veterans could also advance if you wanted them to as well, so that would be another 1 plus d6. You'd basically be looking at the Blade Guard Veterans out of those impulsors can get 30 inches across the battlefield. You have to use that wisely because you could end up putting them in a position where they could end up being charged by the enemy and killed, so it is nice that you can get out of the impulsor after the impulsor is moved. I guess the question is that worth it? The impulsor without shield dome could be easy to destroy for certain enemy lists. It might not be for some, but it might be for some. Something to consider, but I guess we're running 2 impulsors and 5 Blade Guard Veterans inside each. We talk about fast attack next, and we've got the 5 Plasma Exterminator Inceptors, and that gives us potentially a boatload of plasma shots, right? Each Inceptor can get 3 per gun. If you're shooting at models, because they're blast, if you're shooting at any squad of more than 6 models, then you're going to get the maximum of 6 shots per Inceptor. So yeah, you're looking at potentially 30 Inceptor shots. They're probably in Deep Strike. Pay Descent of the Angels when they arrive, so they'll all be hitting on 2s. Arrive them next to a Dreadnought that's either going to cast Wisdom of the Ancient or a Chapter Master, so for reroll 1s. You get a lot of value out of a squad of Inceptors. That's potentially 60 wounds worth of damage. And I guess if you aren't ending up going for a squad, these guys will still delete vehicles. The only weakness they really have is -1 damage enemies, which you can run into. But I think we're going to start seeing less dreadnoughts with the emergence of like Tau and Custodes and their ability to just one-shot dreadnoughts. It's going to put Space Marines into a really difficult position, and that's why I wanted to look at this list, because if we can't rely on dreadnoughts, which have kind of been the solid core that's been keeping Space Marines strong in the meta, what's going to need to change? But regardless, Plasma Inceptors, not a bad choice here at all. Let's look at the second patrol detachment. We have a Librarian with Veil of Time, Might of Heroes, and Psychic Fortress, and I've used Might of Heroes and Psychic Fortress before in a tournament, and together they're very useful. You know, we may as well talk about the two elite Redemptors in this list here, because you Psychic Fortress with the Librarian, he is the Chief Librarian, so your Psychic power goes off in a 5, you give both those Redemptors a 5-up invulnerable save. That can be very valuable. Generally, I think that it's of huge value to Redemptors to get that invulnerable save. Now, the enemy's probably going to go after Redemptor. If they go after either one, and assuming that they can't kill it in a turn, then you have the potential to Might of Heroes that Redemptor and give it toughness 8, meaning next turn it's just going to be that much more difficult for them to wound it, you know? And I've used that in a tournament. I generally, you know, like I did really well in the tournament that I used that, and in my case I had Null Zone as the other power on the Librarian. Null Zone, we've always talked about it being situational. Ben here has gone for Veil of Time, and I guess Veil of Time is always going to be useful in that you may always find yourself throughout the game paying CP for rerolling charges. So Veil of Time kind of just helps you negate that, helps you save on your CP. I mean, he does have units that would benefit from Null Zone, but I guess if your units don't make the charges, then sometimes, you know, Null Zone can be of no value. He also has a Primaris Tech Marine in this list, so one of those Dreadnoughts will basically be hitting on 2s. Because he has the Chapter Master, I assume if the Chapter Master starts on the board, he could make one Dreadnought reroll everything. The other Dreadnought would be hitting on 2s from the Tech Marine. So a good, solid base of fire, I think 2 Redemptors give you. The only problem with the Redemptors I find is that the macro plasmas are a little bit reliant on, you know, you only get D6 shots. It would be much better if they were just like a flat 3 number of shots. But I think if you run 2 D6 feels a lot more reliable than a single D6, you know? So I think that's okay. The Primaris Tech Marine would actually be a key unit here that you could have put Quake Bolts on. I've been using Quake Bolts a lot, and you make that single hit roll. And then when any of your units attack that unit that you hit in melee, they get +1 to hit. Well, 2 Blade Guard veteran squads, they would benefit a lot from +1 to hit potentially. I mean, I guess the Chapter Master could catch up with them, let them reroll 1s, potentially give them Chapter Master rerolls or something like that. But a Primaris Tech Marine making those tactical Quake Bolts also works great with Dreadnoughts. Dreadnoughts don't get that many attacks. Hitting on 3s is kind of their weakness in melee. I mean, their fist, when it hits, is probably going to always wound on 2s and does a ton of damage. But a Quake Bolt there onto the target that they're charging, potentially giving them the +1 to hit, can actually be really useful. So Primaris Tech Marine is not bad in combat as well. Interesting character, I guess. If you think about like using the Librarian, the Tech Marine, and the 2 Redemptors to like push into the middle of the board, along with 2 Impulsors, you could probably do quite a lot with this list. And I guess if you get to go first, and you jump that Librarian into a key spot where you can cast your Psychic Fortress and grab both Redemptors and both Impulsors in like your bubble of 5-up invuln, that could actually be super good as well. And then in this detachment, his kind of finishing it out is that 1 squad of Incursors. And like I said, I do think they are the best choice of troops that we can run at the moment. Their mobility, their ability to survive and jump around, but if you watch my game this week against Tau, you'll realise that they don't survive at all against Tau, but honestly, I don't know really what we have that does. But regardless, Incursors are the best troop choice that we can run. I may have just actually called them Inceptors. It's kind of weird how they've got like Intercessors, Incursors, Inceptors. I believe there's another troop, isn't there, that begins with I? It's like all the troop choices begin with I. Infiltrators, yes. Why do they all have to begin with I? Okay, so finishing off the troop squad with Incursors. Now, if we talk about strategy for this list, so he's got ablative wounds for the Blade Guard veterans in the form of 2 Impulsors, and it's notable that there is no shield drones here, right? Fire support wise, he's got the 2 Redemptors that we just talked about, being able to keep them alive, do a bunch of damage, and then the Inceptors arriving from Deep Strike in the right positions could also deal pretty crazy tactical damage as needed. We got the Sanguinary Priest and Tetmarine to maximize survivability, and I'd previously said in a couple of my videos that I think you had to choose between a Sanguinary Priest and Tetmarine. I mean, there's so many good characters that we can take, right? You've got that Librarian, you've got the Chapter Master, you've got the Chaplain on the bike, Sanguinary Priest, the Tetmarine. There's so many good characters. Characters are the one thing that I think we actually have really good choices for. And I thought before maybe you had to pick. So interesting to see that he's managed to take the Priest and the Tetmarine and get this really strong tournament finish. The Librarian, as I said, is able to buff those core units, and I think a buffing Librarian can be very worth it. Probably when I go back to running my uber competitive list or my next competitive list, I'll probably have that Jump Pack Librarian in there. I think he provides more value than the Sanguinary discipline, I think. So, yeah, Librarian designed to buff core units. There's multiple ways for him to get some rerolls with charge, and I guess that is that his Chapter Master has the Imperium Sword. Librarian can cast the Veil of Time, and then I guess with a CP, potentially he can get 3 charge rerolls a turn. And then what's notable about this list is we really have no jump infantry. And when I say jump infantry, typically I always mean melee jump infantry, right? A lot of people jump in the comments and say like, hey, Inceptors are Primaris jump infantry. And I was like, yeah, Inceptors are terrible in melee, I guess. In turn 3, I guess you're going to get like maybe 20 attacks out of a 300 point squad and then only minus 1 AP. You're much better not being in melee and just shooting those plasma guns. So I think it's fair to say, notably, no good jump infantry. Or no melee jump infantry, would be a better way to say it. Right, strengths and weaknesses. So the strengths of this list are the 10 Blade Guard Veterans, which will be an enemy's face, potentially in turn 1 or 2. I think, used right, those Impulsors can definitely get them forward. It depends on how aggressive you go with your deployment. We worked out last week in the video that I made about all the new maps, and if you haven't seen the video on all the new maps, then it might be worth checking it out. I'll put a link at the end of this video for you guys to check it out. On 2 of the maps, the deployment zones at certain corners are only 12.7 inches away. So if you deployed both Impulsors aggressive, and you went first, you essentially have both Impulsors in your enemy deployment zone in turn 1. Maybe that helps you, maybe it doesn't, but it also means that if you do that and you deploy aggressive, if you've moved the Blade Guard 3 inches out and then move them 6 inches forward, you essentially are only 3, maybe 3.5 inches away from the enemy deployment zone, so there is opportunities to get a turn 1 Blade Guard Veteran charge here as well. I guess the one interesting thing about this is I'm not sure how you're going to make the Sanguinary Priest synergize all that well with the Blade Guard Veterans, because one of the key importance with the Sanguinary Priest is in the command phase he can put a unit into Assault Doctrine early. I mean earlier than turn 3. So arguably the Blade Guards, maybe that's a strategy. Maybe you have to move one Impulsor forward like 14 inches, disembark Blade Guard into cover, have the Sanguinary Priest do a jump in advance into that same cover so that those Blade Guard are in cover, so they're on a 1-up save. They get 6-up shrug because of the Priest's in there. The enemy can't target the Priest because the Blade Guard are protecting him. At the beginning of the next turn, the Priest's going to resurrect a Blade Guard if one died and healed another one, and then they're going to just push out from there. So, kind of interesting options this. And then yeah, so it's going to be tough choices for the enemy, right? Because they're either going to have to focus out those Impulsors, or they're going to have to focus out the Redemptors. And both of these things can be perfected with the Psychic Fortress, and arguably both of them could be repaired. And with the new changes to engage on all fronts, you needing vehicles in board quadrants, then Repulsors that have unloaded their cargo that are able to just move around 14 inches, I guess advance potentially 21 inches, I think it would be, into a board quadrant and sit there for the game, and just, I guess they can fire their Stormbolt, or you wouldn't even, it's not even important. The important thing is that they just sit in the board quadrant, potentially obscured, and just score you engage on all front points all the way through the game. Interesting, right? So he's got the highly aggressive Chapter Master, which is backed up with the 2 jump characters, the Librarian and the Sanguinary Priest. Veil of Time to increase some charge reliability, because you wouldn't want your Chapter Master to make a charge and your Blade Guard to not. So I guess that's why the Veil of Time has been picked over potentially Null Zone. And this list could synergize quite well with Oath of Moment or Relentless Assault. And in terms of Oath, you could definitely have vehicles protected in the middle, healing every turn, protected with a Psychic Fortress, and using that as a base with with potentially like your impulsors, like screening for you, blocking enemy charges. You know, if the enemy have big units that can't move through breachable terrain, you could use impulsors as roadblocks, something like that, so that they can't charge your dreadnoughts or some other characters that you want to protect. Or the other option here really is relentless assault. If you talk about how fast those blade guard can essentially move out of the impulsors, you could flood the enemy's deployment zone very early in the game, fill it up with a load of units, and start schooling relentless assault very, very quickly. I think this list does have some weaknesses though, right? There's no way to prevent Overwatch, so if you wanted to make charges, you're going to need to try and charge from obscuring positions. Not so easy when your units don't have jump packs, a bit harder to maneuver them around like terrain pieces. There's no fight last as well, so there's no way to basically make an enemy, like if you were going to jump those blade guard forward so far, if the enemy had a really nasty melee unit and you could make them fight last, that might make you feel really confident, but you don't have that. There's also a lack of 3 damage weapons, and I think I'm just going to go back a slide. You get 2 Redemptors, so that potentially gives you 4. You get the Tech Marine, that gives you 5. Librarian would give you like 6. Chapter Master would give you 7, and then that's kind of it. So 7 3 damage weapons. If you run into anything that is like a lot of -1 damage, or potentially some of the stuff that's like half damage, I find with less than 10 3 damage weapons in your list, you're going to really struggle. My list's running 17 3 damage weapons, and I've struggled in some of those situations, so make that what you will. And then there's definitely a low number of units for actions in this list. I've said now for a little while that I think battalions are better with Chapter Approved 2022, just because we need more units for actions. A bunch of the missions need units to do actions. If you're going to do like Nachman data, you need more units for actions, really. So, and you need troop units for actions as well, right? Because otherwise you fail Nachman data. If you watched the game this week and you saw my servitors fail Nachman data 2 or 3 times, I think that pretty much is going to relegate my servitors out of my list, because yes, it doesn't happen very often. You know, they've got 66% chance to pass, but when you're in a tight game and you need points and you're against like an imposing enemy like Tau, and your units that are doing Nachman data are failing it turn after turn, that's not something you can rely on in tournament play. Anyway, I digress. Let me move on. So let's score this list out of 50. And before I do this, I want to say that because this list is so different, some of the points that it's going to generate in this comparison are going to be quite a bit less than what we typically see. But I think the whole point of doing this list was to show people that maybe in the current meta, maybe where we are right now, we need to start thinking outside the box. Because if my last 2 games have taught me anything, it's that Custodes, like my whole army just bounced off of it, and then I wasn't survivable enough when they started attacking, because Custodes, you know, they're all hitting on 2s, they're re-rolling, etc., etc. So my army didn't feel survivable enough to take the return fire. And then against Tau, they have so much indirect fire, and it's obnoxious how much AP it gets and how many shots they get. So actually having a bunch of our units inside transports may actually help quite a bit. Now let's talk about this then. We get the 2 troop choices here, and one of them is Phobos, so we're going to get like 7.5 out of 10 for OBSEC. For anti-infantry, we've got some solid shooting to clear the screens, the potential 30 plasma exterminator shots we talked about, combined with the 2 dreads, the plasma cannons, the onslaughts, all that sort of stuff. I think if we came up against a horde army, we could handle it. It wouldn't be too bad. Anti-vehicle monsters. Now, we're relying kind of on the same weapons as above, but we do have those Blade Guard veterans to add in, and they would bring a bunch of attacks at strength 5, -3, 2 damage. So, used right, they can be very useful, and obviously if you can get them in Assault Doctor in a turn early, then it's even more attacks, and it's -4 AP. Not many things are surviving against -4 AP unless they got invulnerable saves. The mobility, I'd say, is a little bit less than what we normally see, because we normally see a bunch of jump pack units. The transports do add some mobility, but late game, if you've lost the transports, then potentially having no jump units and when I say no jump units, I don't mean the characters, I mean actual jump units that can jump into quarters, for example, and do actions or something like that, could be problematic. So we've said 7.5 for mobility. And then specialization, I've also said 7.5. This feels a little bit harsh, but if we categorize it against the things that I normally look at, which is like the ability to fight last, the ability to turn off Overwatch, these sort of things that I highlighted as weaknesses in the last slide, then I guess this list is missing a bunch of tools that we would normally rate pretty highly as Blood Angels. And yeah, I mean, against Tau, 2 times in the game against Tau, I decided that I was so starved of CP because I'd put so much stuff into reserve and I had to use so many CPs to like try and keep my units alive, that I decided twice to charge without using suppression fire. And oh my god, did I lose like so many 2-wound models, or just took so much damage. So I guess this can be countered a little bit by the fact that you've got those 3-wound infantry, and I think 3-wound infantry are actually pretty darn useful in a meta where there's so much 2-damage stuff going around. I mean, I guess it doesn't help against those 3-damage plasma guns that Tau have, but still. 40 out of 50. So the score for this list is not bad. I mean, it's kind of average, but it's just so far outside the realms of probably what we would normally see and expect as Blood Angels. And in some ways, because of chapter approved 2022, this list actually been hit the same as my list in that like the Redemptors went up 10 points. So I really don't know why they needed to go up in points. But I think the other thing to say is, you know, the only buffs we got were for Death Company and for Mephiston, and obviously they don't feature at all in this list either. So if you felt today's video was any good, please hit the like button. It helps YouTube spread my videos to other people, and it's super appreciated. If you're new here and you want to get more Blood Angels content every week, then please consider subscribing. If you want to support the channel, there are various links in the video description below that will do just that, and I appreciate it. I've been John, the BA Commander. You've been awesome. I hope I'll catch you in the next video. By the blood are we made strong, brothers. Peace.